I often say that if at 19, when I just left the cult in which I grew up, if I went to a fortune teller and I asked her what will become of me, and she would say, one day you'll be a public speaker working on global stages, I would have asked for a refund because I thought that is not possible. And I was sent by myself to a commune in Paris where we lived in terrible conditions. We were 14 people in one small apartment. Three of us girls were sleeping in the same bedroom. One of us had to sleep underneath the bed. Our passports were taken away. So my biggest fear when I escaped the cult was that my life is going to be meaningless. And I was so afraid of that I was even contemplating of taking my own life. I was so scared. And therefore I decided not to go back to the commune and just figure out my life. And it's a lot harder than it sounds because escaping the cult was the easy part. Finding meaning was the difficult part.
Welcome back to Beyond the Keynote. I am beyond excited today to speak to Debbie Haski-Leventhal, who is a purpose leader, best-selling author, awarded professor of CSR, a TED talker or TED speaker, and avid public speaker. We were just talking before we started the show today. I can't wait for you to hear Debbie's stories. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carmen. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you for being here. And I love the beautiful tree that you've got in the background. What an amazing color green that is.
You should see it just in the beginning of spring when it becomes like a bride full of white colors. It's beautiful.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Love it. All right. Let's get into our very exciting conversation. I think we're going to go in lots of places today. So I think it's just so important to understand as a speaker how you got to where you did today, because often having important messages to share with the world is because of everything that's happened leading up to where you are right now. So tell us about Debbie growing up. Debbie is a little girl. I mean, did you ever imagine, for instance, that you would be speaking on global stages?
That is such a great question to start with because I often say that if at 19, when I just left the cult in which I grew up, if I went to a fortune teller and I asked her what will become of me, and she would say, one day you'll be a public speaker working on global stages, I would have asked for a refund because I thought that was not possible. So my story is my mom joined the cult when I was just
Wow.
5. It was due to a family tragedy. So very sadly, just before I was born, my older brother was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was 3 and he wasn't even 10, he passed away. Obviously devastating the family. And my mom my first childhood memories are of my mom sitting on the floor crying, mascara running down her face. And I used to try and clean her tears and make her happy, but I felt useless because what can a 3-year-old do in face of such adversity? So for 2 years, she kept asking herself the big questions of why did it happen? Why did it happen to me? What did I do to deserve it? And in her search for meaning, she joined a cult. So I speak about this often. She joined the Kabbalah Centre, which later on became the organization for the stars, the spiritual organizations of Madonna, Demi Moore, and a lot of big stars joined them later. When we joined, and I was just 5, it was a very small organization teaching Jewish spirituality and some new age, if I may say so, mumbo jumbo, and it tied everything together. And this was my childhood, and we were controlled in every possible way. So they changed my name. We were told what to wear, what to think, how to behave. We had the most crazy rituals, from rolling in the snow naked to purify for our sins, to slaughtering chickens that we had to circle around our heads to give some atonement to what we did. There was a lot of purifying of sins going on. And as you know, a 7-year-old, you don't understand how sinful you are that you have to do all these horrific things. But the leaders of the organizations, it's often the case in cults, they were very charismatic, we loved them, we adored them, but also they were quite abusive as well. There was every kind of abuse happening in the cult, and yet I loved it. You know, cults can be hell, but they can also be heaven. They give you this sense of togetherness that there is nothing in the world like it. You all of a sudden you have a family of 300, 400 people. You have leaders that give you the father and mother figure. They give you meaning, they give you, the sense of belonging. And it was so amazing that at the age of 16, all I wanted to do was become a devoted member of the cult, sell their books, spread the light, as we used to call it back then, and be arranged to be married by the leader's wife. So that's what she would do. She would say, Carmen, Jonathan is your soulmate. You need to marry him. And you just did it because she saw into your soul. And so I was very excited when just before I was 19, I was sent to the third commune. I was in three communes in three different countries. And I was sent by myself to a commune in Paris where we lived in terrible conditions. We were 14 people in one small apartment. Three of us girls were sleeping in the same bedroom. One of us had to sleep underneath the bed. Our passports were taken away. We couldn't just leave if we wanted to. All day we were working, doing what we called in the cult plowing, which meant going, selling the books, spreading the lights, recruiting new members, and it was extremely difficult. And I also saw those married women who just got married a year before, and I thought that was the highlight of their lives. And I saw how miserable they were. They were trapped in the apartment. They couldn't, they just had to cook and clean, and they couldn't leave, and they had small babies, and they were miserable, and they were crying on the floor like my mom all these years ago. So what was the point? And so at some point I broke my back and I was sent back, and I thought, I am not, I'm done. I'm done. And therefore, I decided not to go back to the commune and just figure out my life. And it's a lot harder than it sounds because escaping the cult was the easy part. Finding meaning was the difficult part. We were brainwashed that people outside the cult have no meaning in their lives, that they live meaningless lives that's just about bodily pleasures, and there is nothing to envy them for. So my biggest fear when I escaped the cult was that my life is going to be meaningless. And I was so afraid of that that I was even contemplating of taking my own life. I was so scared. And I share that because it's a story of hope. It's not a story of despair. And I went through this very deep meaning search. I even have the diary, the journal that I kept all these years ago with all my thoughts, asking myself, what are my values? Who am I? What kind of a person do I want to be? And I decided back then I want to be, I want to be led by the values like compassion. I want to become a vegetarian. I want to help spread love in the world in a positive way, not like in a cult. And as part of my meaning search, I went to uni. And I was a shy little thing. I shaved my hair. I was tiny. I went to uni, and it was amazing. All of a sudden I could ask the questions that I was not allowed to ask. I had access to immense amount of knowledge and real thinkers and critical thinking, and it was wonderful. But at the same time it was also very, very difficult because I had zero support from my parents, and I had to find a way to survive. So I did everything from cleaning toilets to writing in the newspaper of the university. But then I did something that completely changed my life and led me to who I am today. They had back in Israel a tutoring program where students got to work with a child from a disadvantaged background. And in return, you get half your tuition fee waived. So this was for me the only way I could afford to go to uni, but also an eye-opening experience of what it really feels like to make a difference. I thought I was helping this kid, but in fact, he was helping me. He helped me understand what my life purpose is. And so I said, wow, this is amazing. I love that. And I volunteered for another year. Then I became the volunteer coordinator and the vice manageress of the entire project. Project at the age of 24, I was in charge of 1,000 volunteers and I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
So I went home and I said, okay, so this is what I want to do when I grow up. And I did a master's degree in not-for-profit management, a PhD on volunteering, which led me to who I am today, a professor that focuses on pro-social behavior of individuals and organizations, volunteering, corporate social responsibility. And after seeing the worst in humanity, I decided to dedicate my entire life to seeing the best in humanity. That's my spiel.
Wow. That is an incredible story, Debbie. Oh my goodness. Where do I even go from there? Whew. Well, I did have a question that was a while back though in your story. You said at one stage, and then I decided to leave the cult. Were you allowed to just go, or did you have
I had
to
a
run
window of
away?
opportunity. So I wasn't, because they sent me back from Paris to Tel Aviv, I had a window in which I was with my parents for a few days. And then I said, I'm not going back to the commune. So I used that window to escape. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I could have physically leave. I was not locked up in a door. It was the
Mm-hmm.
emotional fear that kept me going more than anything else. The fear that my life will
Okay.
be meaningless. Yeah, I
Yes.
couldn't leave
Wow.
the apartment in Paris. I had to be sent back. But when I was sent back, I was like, okay, I'm done.
Mm-mm. Well, thank goodness you did decide to leave, and that is enormous. That mental load that was on you, that emotional weight that would have kept most people there.
Mm.
So, you said that you did a lot of journaling and self discovery, something that most people don't actually do because we're just busy living our lives and doing what we think is normal. Um, how important was that process for you to be able to then enter what we call the normal world out of the cult? I'm doing normal in italics for anyone
Yes.
who's not watching the video.
Good one. Um, it was so important. So I had the privilege of undergoing 6 months of very difficult meaning search. It was not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was very hard.
No. Mm.
A lot of fear, a lot of things I had to unlearn, a lot of things I had to let go. And I did that slowly. It wasn't that the day I left the cult, I left everything. It took me a while. And for example, I grew up also in a very, very religious school because of the cult. They sent me to extra religious school. So I was only wearing skirts and dresses. So one day when I decided to wear my first pair of jeans, I was
Uh-huh.
walking on the street and I remember asking myself, how are people not staring at me because I'm walking around naked? This is how it felt. Everything
Wow.
was, every small step was not easy. But I got to say to myself, look, something you believed so profoundly for your entire childhood turned out not to be true for you. So let's look, I even used that word. I said, let's look at all the dogmas that you had so far. And I got to ask everything. I said, what do I believe in? Like, do I believe in God? Do I believe in religion? What religion? I asked myself everything. It was very profound,
Yes.
very difficult. And to be able to journal that, one was very useful for me to make sense of my thoughts that sometimes felt like all over the place. But two, to be able now, 35 years later, to read that and go, wow, look at this 19-year-old what she's been through,
Yes.
but also her understanding of life and religion and everything. I'm so happy that I did that. And I'm always so grateful that I had those 6 months in which nobody wanted me. I couldn't work anywhere. I couldn't find a job. All I did was, stay home and think. And I
Mm.
feel so privileged because it really taught me so much.
No, it would have absolutely. And do you remember, are you happy to share a couple of the big things? So interesting that wearing jeans felt like you were naked, for instance. Are there a couple of big things that you were taught to believe about the world that when you were on the other side, you discovered, for you at least, just weren't true? And what were they?
Well, the most profound one was that they believe that people outside the cult have meaningless life. They're only led by hedonism. And when I went outside, started conversing with people, especially in university, I found really amazing human beings who had such a strong set of values, that they believed in stuff, that they were living meaningful lives. And I thought, okay, that was the first lie. um, I was so happy to be able to discover that. Um, and then there were all the rituals and things that we did that you feel like your life is, if you don't do that, or if you do something else, a lightning will come and just hit you. And then you discover that you can actually do stuff and nothing happens. Um, and that someone else's beliefs doesn't have to be your set of beliefs. It doesn't mean that my set of beliefs has to be someone else. Like, I do not prick
Yeah.
for anyone to believe in what I believe.
Mm.
But the ability to say, I'm not thinking as a collective, I'm thinking as an individual, that is
Mm.
really a critical discovery for me to make as
Mm.
someone who just left the cult.
Yeah. Wow. And and I'm interested the jeans thing. So obviously was it just a female requirement that you always wore a dress or a skirt?
Yeah, so we had to be
Yes.
modest, and so we had to, and I'm doing
Okay.
that with quotation marks too.
Yes.
So yes, there was a very strong code of what we were allowed to wear, what we were allowed to look like. Later, it kept developing. So when we joined, it was kind of laissez-faire, do whatever you want. And later, there were things that we were all supposed to be doing. For example, on the Sabbath, we were all to wear white. So there was, if you look at some of the pictures, if you go on Google and you do Google image and you do Kabbalah Centre, you'll see a lot of photos of people wearing white. And that was part of making us into a collective. So to give up all these rituals, all these habits that we had to develop, and also there were a lot of different prayers, a lot of things we used to say, and breaking all these habits, that was not easy. But the other big thing was talking to guys, because I grew up in a girls only ultra orthodox school. We were not allowed to talk to men. I was just waiting for the leader's wife to tell me who I can marry. So for me to speak to men was was such a new thing that okay, this is a bit embarrassing, but the first 6 months or so, I fell in love with every man who spoke
Oh.
to me, because it was like, wow, he's so cute.
Oh.
I became a little bit more selective, luckily. But it was,
Yes.
it's like every man who paid attention to me, I thought, wow, yeah, it's incredible, because I was just not used to it.
Mm. Oh my goodness. That is wow. I have no words. So, if we think about speaking, because obviously this out of this world experience that you had growing up, and then the fascination with a university and discovering that there were places where you could learn so much and be surrounded by others who were critical thinkers and were also wanting to learn, has led you to speaking today. So, do you remember? And I wonder, in terms of speaking in front of groups of people, did that ever feel stressful or not natural for you? Or was it something that you just loved doing and was very natural? And did you have to do that as a child growing up within the cult environment? Were there times where you were speaking to large groups? Or did that start when you left and were in university?
Okay, you get me thinking a lot. So, first in the cult, most of the time women were hushed. So, I was not doing any public speaking. In the cult, I was just put to the side. I didn't matter at all. I moved to universities. I'm so shy that I still remember in the third year, we had to deliver sort of a short presentation about a topic in philosophy, because I was studying philosophy, and that I was so nervous that I could barely breathe. And so when I got the first job as a volunteer coordinator, and they asked me, what do you think will be your greatest challenge? I said, I don't have a sense of authority. And I almost didn't get the job because of that. Then they decided to grace me with a second interview, and I tried to fix that impression. But I was so shy. I was such an introvert. During that work in that project, I started teaching the volunteers and then the volunteer coordinators how to do their work, and that was the first kind of instance of public speaking to smaller groups, which again helped me. I mean, the thing about public speaking is you'll probably hear a lot in this podcast is the more you do it, the less scary it becomes. Really something you've got to practice. It's just like driving. You just have to practice. And so I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I did it. And every year it became easier and easier. And then I did a master's degree. And when I did a PhD, I started teaching a little bit. Again, so nervous, so anxious, but it went okay. And then I learned that actually I'm a good teacher. I can really inspire people. I have the ability to take something complicated and simplify it for the students, and I'm enjoying that. I'm actually enjoying standing in front of a group teaching. And so slowly, I come out of my shell and I become this really enthusiastic teacher, which later became more of a speaker. But in the beginning, it was really small groups of people, which I could handle. I think the largest was about 100 students or later 200 people. It was really my TED Talk that was the first instance of large public speaking that changed everything.
And how long ago was your TED Talk?
7 years.
Okay. Well, I mean, to come from someone that was told not to speak and then hit university and start learning this whole other world, and then having to stand up in front of the class, which, you know, anyone that's been to university can imagine that. I think there's not a degree that wouldn't involve some form of presentation in university, to then ending up doing a TED Talk. I mean, that's a pretty incredible journey. And I know that a lot of our listeners are speakers, and a lot of people do enjoy being up on stage. But I know some of you are probably listening and thinking, should I speak? And I want to be able to speak, but but I'm a bit scared of it. So be inspired by Debbie right now, because of all the people that I've heard that were a bit shy, I was a really shy child, believe it or not. I fell in love with acting and performing though. And for me, when I was on stage, I was playing another character. So it was safe to be up
Oh,
in front of
wow.
everybody, because it wasn't me that was being up there and being exposed. I had to learn that as I became a thought leader and a leader in corporate business before that. So, how on earth did you end up doing a TED Talk? Tell us about the story that led you to do a TED Talk.
Oh, wow. I haven't thought about that for years, but what happened? I told you I'm very passionate about impact and creating positive impact. And in fact, it took me a while, but I started defining my life purpose as someone who tries to create a ripple effect impact, inspiring others to create impact so they in turn impact others and so on. So that became like my life purpose. And so at some point, I went to someone high in the university where I am, Macquarie University in Sydney, and I said, could we do something to lead this university to become more impactful? And he loved the idea. And we said, we're going to call it the Transformational University Initiative. And for 2 years, I've put together an amazing group of people, and we were playing with the idea. We were really being creative. We were talking to every leader in the university. It just became a remarkable way of thinking forward. But at some point, the university didn't want to continue with that. I'm not going to go into why, but it didn't want to continue with that. And then I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to share this idea with the world so maybe other universities can take it on.
Yeah,
So
great.
I started writing this down. I started writing this idea and I call it a purpose-driven university. And I asked myself, as a professor of corporate social responsibility, I was not a full professor back then, but as a teacher of corporate social responsibility, as a researcher, I've learned so much about companies that are truly led by purpose, that are defined not by the product that they sell, but by the impact they are trying to create. So, what if I took all that knowledge and applied it to higher education? What could happen if universities become more sustainable, responsible, impactful? So, I started writing it down. And then a friend of mine told me he was applying to do a TED Talk at Macquarie University. And that was a relatively safe. It's a TEDx. It's, it's a small community. I felt safer doing that than doing TED Sydney. And so I also applied and I thought I will talk about this idea of the purpose driven university. And that's how it came to be. And it was really challenging because those who listen who's ever done a TED talk know that you've got to write a script. The script has to be approved, and then you have to learn every word by heart. So you are an
Yes,
actress. You know
I
what it
did.
means to memorize large script. For me,
Yes.
that was a first. So I rehearsed everywhere in the shower while I was driving for like weeks and weeks and weeks. I went around saying, what is the purpose of universities and what is the role in the world? Many would say, and so on and so on. I was just rehearsing like crazy. I still remember most of it by heart, but
Okay.
it's like what
I'm
you
sure you do.
hear and then forever, to be or not to be. It's like I really memorized it. And it was a little bit nerve wracking just because of that. Even though I'd done public speaking, I was just terrified of forgetting my script. So,
Mm.
but it went okay. There were a couple of moments, but it went really well. And that gave me the appetite of doing real public speaking to large audiences.
Amazing. And I was laughing. I did a TED style talk just recently, and I because as you know, with a lot of public speaking, you don't have to write a script out word for word to be able to deliver that. But I agree with the TED style talk. You absolutely have to do that, and you have to memorize it. So I had 1 week's notice because someone else was speaking, and it was a favor that I came in and replaced them because they
Wow.
unfortunately couldn't speak anymore. So I wrote a script, memorized it, and was on in a week. And I thought, oh, this is actually really good because I ask a lot of my clients, and so I got put back in the hot seat myself, and it went really well. But I was able to draw on, as you said, that background of acting where, I used to learn dialogue for whole plays that went for an hour and a half, for instance. And not that that was a monologue,
Yeah.
but there were other characters speaking within that hour and a half, but there was a lot of dialogue to learn. And there used to be a radio show on in Melbourne, Australia, and they would interview guests, actors from all over the world, very famous actors, and they would always ask the same question: how do you learn your lines? And it became a bit of a joke.
Oh.
And the actors would all like sort of just pause, and they'd be like, oh, well, I just have to like repeat them over and over and over again. And I always think if I had some kind of magic formula for people to learn lines, I would be like a trillionaire by now because everyone wants that that secret recipe. I think people that have photographic memories, this is your calling. This is where you can learn a script very easily. But I always tell my clients, so I loved that you said you did it driving, you did it in the shower, you did it everywhere. Like that's what I literally say to people. I'm like, practice in the shower, practice when you're driving, practice when you're cooking dinner, like wherever you're doing something else. When you're going for a walk, be learning your lines at the same time
My poor
because that's
daughter.
the only way to do it.
My poor daughters even knew my TED talk by heart because
Yes,
they
and
heard me
isn't it?
rehearse so many times. So
I feel like I think when you're not under pressure to learn something too, like I can often say my clients' dialogue back to them because I've heard them saying it so many times and I've helped write it most of the time as well. But I think because I'm under no pressure to learn it, it's like, come on, you know this, it's da 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 da, and I'll spit out their dialogue. But when it is you, as I got reminded just recently, it is harder. And I think for me, as I'm learning the words, I visualize the scene or the pictures, whereas others can actually see the words. So I think everyone's
mm,
different
yeah.
in that way. But that's amazing. And I love that you decided to do that because of the impact that you wanted to have in the world. And that drives a really great message and speaker when someone's on stage, because you generally, when that's the case, you have the passion that you need to transfer that message to your audience. So, on the back of that TED talk, were you invited to speak elsewhere? Did that spark what came next?
Yeah, I was just 3 weeks ago. I was invited to speak in the huge European Commission summit on how to attract new talent to universities, and my opening keynote was the Purpose Driven University. So it just keeps on having an effect on the way that I get invited. I get invited to speak about different topics. So it could be for corporations. How do we create impact? How do we engage our employees in our corporate social responsibility? Um, so that would be one kind. Another one would be just inspirational speeches about finding meaning and creating or finding your life purpose and so on. That's my favorite kind of talk to do. And then the last one is more around higher education. So these are the main topics for which I get invited to do public speaking, and I still see the dividends of doing that TED talk, even though it didn't reach millions of views, but it does have a nice number of views, and it still gets me some speaking gigs today. So that is great. But speaking about impact, it's funny because I often say that when you do public speaking, some people would give you the advice of imagine everyone naked, and I find it
Oh, yes.
horrifying. I don't want to imagine everyone naked. It's
No.
traumatizing. But
I agree. I don't know who came up with that saying, but whenever my clients say, "Oh, I'm supposed to imagine everyone naked," I'm like, no,
no.
I don't do that.
No, thank you. So
It's a bit traumatic.
instead, I use my imagination to say, as I'm about to go to stay on the stage, I never know who is in the audience and how my speech is going to make a difference for them. They would go on to do something amazing, great, and then they will inspire others. And so it becomes this ripple effect. And I always do this minute of imagination before I go on stage, thinking about you never know who's in the audience. You never know what kind of an impact you can create by doing this. And that always helps me speak with passion and enthusiasm because I feel like I'm speaking to every person in the audience who might, who knows, it might evoke new possibilities within them.
I love that, and it's so important as a speaker, isn't it? I mean, that's what it's all about. It is all about your audience and what they're going to gain from your talk. And I love that you're talking about the ripple effect. So what are they going to then do that's going to affect someone else and someone else and someone else?
Right.
And that's part of the power and magic of being a public speaker, is that you can connect to so many people at once in the one talk rather than having to connect with individuals. It would take you so much longer, wouldn't it, to connect with all of those individuals separately. If you can connect with 1,000, 10,000, however many people in the one room at once with a message and have every single person in that room feel it, that's pretty magical.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is magical. It really feels, I feel so grateful that I get on the stage and I get to be part of something magical.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. So with your current speaking now, you're still a full-time professor, aren't you, at a university in Australia?
I
Yes.
am, yeah. So
Yeah.
public speaking is something I do in addition to all the work that I have to do as a professor.
Yes. And as a professor, I know before we were chatting, before we started the show, you mentioned that you approach your lessons with your students like public speaking, in that you try and create a great experience for them and make it engaging and interesting, rather than what some of our listeners might be imagining, a traditional university sitting setting. Can't get the word out, setting that we see in the movies sometimes, where all the students are like completely disengaged, just sitting there because they have to sit through a boring lecture, and there's someone speaking in a monotone voice up the front with copious amounts of PowerPoint slides with lots and lots of tiny writing all over them. So tell us a bit about what you try and bring to your lessons. And I believe you've won an award for your teaching, is that right? Two.
Yeah, double awarded.
Tell
Um,
us about that.
yes. So, what I try to bring to the classroom are the same techniques that I use to engage people in my public speaking. I find the most powerful one is storytelling. I use a lot of storytelling. I really am, I love being a storyteller. I used to do that when I was a kid. They used to have this beautiful TV show with John Hurt, and it was called The Storyteller. And he used to tell these European fairy tales, but it was always with so much detail. And I remember sitting with children when I was like 14, 15, and repeating these stories to them. So I became the storyteller. And so I love sharing stories. I know how to build the stories. I know how to make the twist and the surprise and the emotional wow factor of the story. So I always use storytelling in my teaching and in my public speaking. The other thing is you'll never see me stand behind a podium. I find that uncomfortable. I think it's like, why would people hide behind a podium when you can create a real connection with the audience? So I will always try to, either go down or be with the audience and try to create a body language that's open and connected. And eye contact. When I speak, I create eye contact with as many people as I can. So this is another thing that I use. Presentations. Oh my God. It's so great and it's so bad.
Yeah.
So you have to know how to use PowerPoints, because if you have a lot of bullet points and you stand next to the slide and you read them out loud, you're disservicing yourself and everyone else. So I see PowerPoint as a beautiful way of creating a visual background to what I'm talking about, just like the picture behind you. For those who don't see us, Carmen has this beautiful, colorful, I think it's flowers of pink and yellow, and it creates a beautiful background. So the PowerPoint is there to serve the public speaking, not to replace it. And so that's the way I do my teaching, that's the way I do my public speaking as well. And I always go thinking, how can I evoke new possibilities within people? How can I help elevate them to a new level of imagination, creativity, and doing that we're not even expecting before we've met? And that is what I do as a teacher. That's why I do as a public speaker. And that's why I got all these awards. And students and people in the audience where I speak often write to me, could be 2 years later, 5 years later, saying, wow, that course or that public speaking changed my life. And that is the most rewarding thing that I can have.
Oh, absolutely. I love the way you described how to use PowerPoint. For anyone that's listening, listen to Debbie. I will always say to my clients, I'm not against using PowerPoint. You need to use it to add impact to your message, not to give it for you.
Exactly.
So I often use acting analogies, and I'll say you are the lead in your message, and any tool you use, PowerPoint's one tool you can use, the supporting cast. So let's not have them take over, but let's have them elevate and support what you're doing. And it sounds like you do that with amazing imagery that you're using in the background. What else was I going to comment on that you just said then? Oh, the awards that you won. So I love that you bring that to the classroom, because honestly, why should a lesson be boring? It should be inspiring and interesting, and that will help the message stick so much more for the people that are learning. What awards were they that you won?
Oh, it's the Vice Chancellor Excellence in Teaching Award at our university. So you get it from the Vice Chancellor, like the president of the university. And it's a big ceremonial thing that you get awarded as the best teacher in the whole university.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. So good. So inspiring. All right. Now, if I could wave a magic wand and you could be doing anything you want to be doing right now, what would that be?
Take me from this room, put me on a stage somewhere in the world. The sun is beaming through. I'm on an open air stage with 5,000 people, and I get to share my story, move people emotionally, inspire them to do their great work possible, and talk about purpose, meaning, and impact. That's where I want to be right now.
Oh, amazing. So, all right, so let's go there. For those that are listening, you've probably heard me say that Illuminated Story partner with thought leaders from all around the world, and we help elevate their keynotes to what I call a keynote show. So that's blending some strategically placed elements of theatrical magic in with keynote speech. One of my clients at the moment, he's actually based in Miami in America, he was, or still is, the CEO of a luxury catering company. So he's run that for the last 50 years, one of Miami's most iconic catering companies. They've served 4 US presidents, John Paul Pope II, copious amounts of celebrities, so sports
Wow.
stars and actors and singers. And every time he tells me another story, I'm like, wow, tell me more, tell me about that person. So we've created, he wrote a book called Plating Up Profits, and it was all of his business lessons for the last 50 years in business, which you can imagine is incredible. And he had a pretty impactful personal story in there as well. But we've taken that book and we've put it on the stage, and we're serving a 5-course dinner. I'm doing my quotation marks again for the audience, and each course is a different lesson in business.
Oh,
There's a sales and
wow.
marketing course, and then there's the legacy course at the end, and there's the customer service course, etc., etc. So that analogy runs the whole way through, and depending on where he's speaking, we either bring out the full leaders table with all of the beautiful place settings that he would do in a big event for someone, or it can just be him speaking if need be. And that's the beauty of theatre. There's the big theatrical musicals that have all the bells and whistles and lighting and, the orchestra, etc. And then there's the one man or woman show that can be quite minimalistic, and maybe they're just using one prop, for instance, and they might be just all dressed in black on stage, and it's very heavily reliant on their storytelling and their embodiment of that story. So let's have a bit of fun together, Debbie, and let's talk about your favourite keynote. So you can talk us through the core message and key points of your favourite keynote, and let's just dream together. Let's elevate it to a keynote show and see where we go. How does that sound?
Sounds amazing. I'm so excited. So let me share a little bit about my favorite keynote that's not mine. My
Oh,
favorite
okay.
keynote of all times is Benjamin Zander TED Talk, where he talks about classical music. He uses the piano. He jumps often on the stage. He really uses the piano there. He uses the music to talk to the audience about not just music, but leadership and inspiration and ideas and how to persist with what you're doing. It's a beautiful keynote. So that is my favorite keynote. The one I think I watch it over 100 times. I show it to my students too. They all cry, they all laugh. So when you get the audience to cry so much and laugh so much, you really awake that emotional part of the brain, and that's when you create deep connection with them. So if I were to have my favorite keynote, or the thing that I could imagine, as I said, it would be a beautiful stage, maybe outdoors, maybe indoors. It might have a piano.
Mm,
Um, yes.
I like
I
it.
I am an amateur musician. Just 5 years ago,
Okay.
when COVID started, I started teaching myself how to play. I had to really learn how to read the notes, and today I play full pieces by Chopin and Bach and Mozart.
Oh,
I love it. It's
amazing. I
the
think you're more
best.
than an amateur then.
It's the best gift I've given to myself. So I would have certain pieces of music to actually accompany some of the things that I say, maybe
Mm.
played by someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not want to have a red round carpet because
Yes.
I like to move around the stage a lot. And with TED
Yes.
Talk, you're confined to that little space. And no, I like to really, be all over the place.
Yes.
Have a huge presence. I'm quite a tiny person. You can't see me, but
Okay.
I'm just like 153. I'm tiny. When I go
But so
on
much power in
stage,
that tiny body of yours.
when I go on stage, I feel like I'm 2 meters high. I like really feel I'm bigger than life, and that's just an attitude that I taught myself how to have. And so to have that and the ability to connect with the audience, I would have had some slides that would have zero words on them, some pictures, some ideas, maybe a couple of models, but that would be like at the background. Beautiful flowers around. I need this sense of connection with nature. That's why I would prefer speaking somewhere where there are trees and birds, even if they make their beautiful sounds over me as well. But to be able to have that sense of connection, one of the best things what I need to do when I feel like my batteries are empty, which happens, is to take 15 minutes, 20 minutes out in nature and just take a walk. So I have this strong connection with nature. I would love nature to be present somewhere on that stage. So could be flowers, could be, yeah. And then maybe have another thing that I would love to have on that stage, because imagination is cheap, is to have a bookcase behind me with books that inspired me and some of my books. Um, and maybe a couple of pictures there too. So that is how I would make my ideal stage. And I'm not going to let myself be limited by reality right now, because it's
No,
imagination and I
yeah,
can do
no, this
whatever
is
I
right.
want.
Yes. I love that. Well, definitely we would need to have music accompanying your keynote. And uh, in my team, I have a musical director who can create musical scores for clients. So I think for you, we would have to have a completely designed just for you musical score, because we've got an unlimited budget right now. We can do whatever we want. And I love the idea of the open air stage for you. Where that's not possible, if you're wanting to bring in nature, we could use lighting to create the effect of nature. And I don't know if you've ever seen theatre, like for instance Beauty and the Beast I saw recently, and there's scenes where they're moving through a forest or they're moving towns, and you can create that effect now in live theatre with sort of scrimmages that come down like clear sort of curtains, and you can project lighting onto them and create all sorts of incredible scenes. So I think that lighting could create your nature, your forest or
Mm.
beach or whatever it is that you want to create in nature that's surrounding you. And I had this thought where you said that you feel like you're 2 meters high when you're on stage, even though you're quite short in real life. Again, we could use lighting, and there could be this shadow effect of the 2 meter tall you that comes up like above you or behind you. And that might only be in the moments where you're talking to the audience about how you feel on stage, or how they could feel if they spent the time to really figure out what they want to do in life and to have the impact that they were designed to have by being here. I think that could be a really impactful moment in your keynote show for the audience.
I love that. I love that so much. Now I'm
Oh, there's
more.
so much we could do. And look, if you can play piano like that and you love it, why not have a little section where you're playing the piano?
Maybe.
Another one of my clients at the moment, she is speaking on aesthetic intelligence. So she's an image specialist, a stylist, but she's got a very intellectual way of helping her clients. And she talks about the fact that you have an aesthetic effect on someone, whether you do that intentionally or not, because we all get impressions of each other instantly without even thinking. We don't even know we're doing it. And so she talks about architecting that and sending out the message and having the impact you want to have, which I love. But she's also an ex-professional singer. So she used to travel around the world and sing. So we're incorporating singing into her keynote, which is relevant to one of the stories that she's telling throughout. So I think the sky's the limit, Debbie. We can create this. I think we could make this real.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Oh, wow. What a great...
You make it happen, right? You dream it, you make it happen.
Exactly. What a great conversation. So at the moment, I'd love to know, because we talk about the business of speaking on the Beyond the Keynote podcast, and for some of the wonderful people I get to interview, speaking is their business, and that's how they make their money. And we've got incredible stories of people that have charged $500 for their first keynote and are now charging $20,000, $50,000, whatever it is. And then there's others like yourself who are still in another full-time job. They might be a CEO of a company or a founder, or an expert like yourself and speaking because it adds impact to the world and to what they're doing. And sometimes they're paid for that, sometimes they're not. So is it something that you are charging a fee for, or that you get offered a speaking fee for, or is it something that you just do complimentary at the moment?
It depends. If I feel like this is for impact, for example, the other day I was speaking for a not-for-profit that helps women who were sex trafficked, women and girls who were sex trafficked in Cambodia. And so I volunteer my time, and then they sell the tickets, and that money went to help those women. So it's impactful. It's not for money. But yeah, I would either charge a speaking fee or get all my expenses covered by the inviting organization. It took me a while to understand that my time is worth money. As a woman, sometimes you feel uncomfortable taking money for something you feel like, but I love doing it. Yes, but when you do put a price to it, you make people understand your value, not just your financial value, but also your social value. And so my maybe tip for, especially for young women who are thinking about this, you can charge. And I remember, as you said, just like as you said, the first time I spoke, I charged like $500.
Yeah.
And I was so sure they're gonna come back to me and say, "No, sorry, this is too much." Seriously.
Yes.
Um, but now, I'm not at the 20,000 bracket, but I'm getting, what I am comfortable in getting, and I would love to just dedicate my life to public speaking, because
Yeah.
public speaking is my happy place. When I'm on stage and I get to speak to people and I see their eyes shining and I see the sparkle, ah, there is not a lot of things in life that I love more. It's just the ability to connect with people emotionally. No one is on their phone when I speak. No one is on their phone. They all look at you. They all want to hear more. They're all captivated by your story and what you have to share. And for me, that level of connection makes me feel like my life is worth living.
Ah, that's amazing. It's yes, I think you definitely need to be on more stages and spreading your message around the world, because what an incredible message it is. Debbie, it has been so amazing talking to you today. Thank you for being so generous and sharing your complete story with myself and our audience. If someone does want to book you for speaking, how do they get in touch with you?
Firstly, this was one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. I've
Ah.
done so many, I lost count, but this was amazing. I loved it. And I love that we got to daydream together here. So that was amazing. I have a website, but I'm also represented by ICMI. And who knows what else we can do to get me out there. So right now, the
Yes.
best way is to contact me either via my website or with ICMI. And I'm always
And what's
happy to
your
do.
website address?
If you just look up my name, Debbie
Hmm.
Haski-Leventhal, which I know is, it's a
Yeah.
mouthful. So Husky was my maiden name, and then I added my husband's name to mine. I wanted to keep mine. I could have just kept
Good
mine,
on you.
but
Yes.
it's quite long. But if you just look for me, even if you just do Debbie Husky, my website is the first thing that comes up, and so you can find me there. And also look for me in ICMI, and you will find me there.
Perfect. And we'll definitely put everything in the show notes for anyone that's listening and needs to get in contact with Debbie. All the information will be there. Debbie, is there anything you would like to leave our audience with before we close our conversation today?
I think we covered so much, but as I said before, public speaking becomes easier the more you do it. So even start practicing on very small groups, but do it. And I always say, do something that scares you in life, because yes, public speaking is no longer scary for me, but public playing is so scary for me, and I still do it. I go to the QVB and I play in the public piano there, and I do something that scares me, but you keep on doing it. The more you do it, the less it scares you. Think about why you want to do public speaking and connect to that why, And it would be good if it's like around your impact and purpose. Connect to that why every time before you go on stage.
Yes, that was beautiful. I remember you saying that in our conversation. So, so important. Thank you so much, Debbie. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Carmen, and thank you for everyone who listened.
All right, here's where you're standing. You can close this episode, think that was fun, and go back to doing things the way you've always done them. Or you can decide you're done being the speaker, the leader that people politely applaud and immediately forget. If you want to create the kind of moments we talked about today, the theatrical, the unforgettable, the profitable, I've put together something that'll change how you think about the stage forever. It's called Beyond the Keynote, Creating Your Illuminated Story. No fluff, no theory, just methodology I use with elite speakers and leaders who are done playing small. Go to illuminatedstory.com/masterclass. And hey, if this episode hit you somewhere, share it, leave a review. It takes 30 seconds and helps more people discover that great speaking isn't magic. It's a game, and you can learn to win it. I'm Carmen Sederino. Don't just speak, illuminate. See you next week.